So it truly feels like it has been a long time coming, but I am finally ready to get into our spoilery vlog for The Great Hunt by Robert Jordan, which is book 2 in the Wheel of Time series. If you guys missed the Eye of the World video, I will link it up here for you guys, but as you can probably tell, I'm going to be making a series of spoiler-filled vlogs containing all of my thoughts, predictions, and reactions to each book in this iconic epic fantasy series. I have to say I'm a little bit intimidated, but I am enjoying it so far, which is good news. So I'm not really going to have any introduction to this video. The only prelude we're going to have is the warning that this is going to be full of spoilers. So if you haven't read The Great Hunt and you don't want to be spoiled for it, then I would recommend clicking out of this video and coming back when you are ready to hear all of my thoughts, feelings, and sometimes crazy predictions. But for everybody else who has read this book, I'm already 154 pages into it, so I'm almost a quarter of the way through. And while I am really enjoying this series, especially in terms of the writing style, it is a slow one for me. It takes me longer to read a page than it typically does to read a page of other books. So the way that I'm approaching it this month is I'm breaking it down into 30-ish page chunks. I have to read like a minimum of 32 pages a day to have it done by the end of the month, which is my goal. So I'm essentially just reading to the chapter break that is past 32 pages. So I've been reading this for 4 or 5 days now, and it really does jump right in. Considering it is definitely a slow-paced, slower moving series, we jump right in to where we left off at the end of Eye of the World. Very little time has passed, and we're setting up with Rand, Egwene, Mat, Perrin, Moiraine, and Lan, is that everybody? Nynaeve, in Faldara, where they have been since the conclusion of the first book, which I have to say I actually was surprised that we got right back into it, because since concluding the last video, I don't know if it was in my comments or whether I found out somewhere else, but I believe that Robert Jordan intended this series to be a trilogy, and then for some reason himself or his publishers changed their mind and it was supposed to be a standalone, which I believe is part of the reason why the end of book 1 is so rushed. And then they decided to change it back into a trilogy, but then it obviously ended up being like 15-16 books long. So I feel like a lot of the complaints that people have about the pacing of this series make a lot of sense now that I have that knowledge. And I'm not necessarily like, I haven't fact checked that, so don't come at me if I'm wrong. I just read that somewhere. Something that I'm really enjoying about this so far is that we are straight into the Aes Sedai, which is what I'm very, very intrigued about, especially off the back of the first book. I didn't really know where the first book was going to end, so I was expecting us to actually go to Tar Valon, and obviously we end up detouring to the Blight instead. But even though we haven't made it to Tar Valon yet in this book, I'm excited that the Aes Sedai have come to us and we're learning a little bit more about them, because what I'm finding especially interesting is the politics within the Aes Sedai and the fact that like the Amelin seat is not trusted by everybody. The Red Arja don't want the Amelin seat to be in power because they distrust all men. So the Amelin seat and Moiraine are working to a goal that I guess is the best for the Aes Sedai, but not all of the Aes Sedai would agree with that. Rand is currently still continuing to be his insufferable self, and he's just having a little bit of a panic running around Faldara right now. Something that I am finding a little bit frustrating is that with the last book as well, and what I've read of this one so far, it is just a series of people making plans and then never actually following through on them because a spanner gets thrown in the works. And obviously I don't want every book to be like, we're gonna go do this, and then they go and do that without any interruption, but I just feel like every time they set out to make a plan and plan on following through on it, like they are severely disrupted. So in particular, they were planning to send, was it Rand, Mat, and Perrin to transport the horn to somewhere that's like really, I consulted the map, it's like really far south. They were going to take it to, is it Ilion? Because I think the Ilians have a set of prophecies or beliefs about the horn. However, their plans have changed now because the horn has been stolen. Faldara was invaded by Trollocs, and not only have they taken the horn, they've also taken Mat's dagger, which without it he is going to die. So the plan now is actually kind of similar to what they originally set out to do, but they're now going to reclaim the horn and the dagger so Mat will live, and obviously to get the horn back in their possession. I believe that Egwene and Nynaeve's path are going to diverge here, providing of course that people actually follow through on the plan that they've currently made. But at this point I think Egwene and Nynaeve are intending to set out to Tar Valon to train the skill that they have, or the ability they have to control the one power. So I think that's pretty much all that we have going on so far. At the minute, I just want a little bit more of the other characters and a little bit less of Rand. To me, I just feel like Rand being this chosen one character, while it is something that I definitely expected from this series, my personal interest lies more in the path of Matt and Perrin than it does with Rand, because Rand's path seems a little bit more clear cut. He is the Dragon Reborn. That is his role. I'm not sure how it will unfold, but I know that that is his purpose. Whereas I know that Matt, Perrin, Egwene, and Nynaeve have a role to play within this series. They are, is it Tarvaren? But as of yet, I don't really know what that role is, and I'd like to get a little bit more into that. That being said, I am still kind of expecting it to predominantly follow Rand and his path, because he's the main character of this series. But my interest off the back of reading Eye of the World, my favorite characters were Lan, and oh my god, Lan and Nynaeve have already had a beautiful angsty moment in here, which I adored. But my favorite characters were Lan and Perrin, so it's Perrin's story and the old magic and the wolves that I'm more interested in. So I hope that we're going to get a little bit more of that going forward. Today's section is actually going to take me up to like page 196, and I really could not predict where this book is going to go at this point, because of how everyone's plans keep getting disrupted. So I am on page 208. I've just read the very end of chapter 11, which is narrated by Paddon Fane, I believe. Yeah, Paddon Fane, who is a dark friend, which we know from the first book. And he's talking about Rand, and they're following all of the Trollocs from the keep in the search for the horn, and also for Matt's dagger. So Paddon Fane is one of the people that they're following, and he's saying, like, he's staring back the way that they've come, and he's saying that he can't sense Rand anymore. And then it says, or perhaps Althor was doing his vanishing trick. Sometimes in the keep, the boy had suddenly vanished from Fane's senses. He did not know how, but always Althor came back just as suddenly as he had gone. He would come back this time too. I'm wondering if this vanishing is when Rand enters the void, because the way that I thought of the void, it is called the void, right? Where he like focuses and calms himself. The way that I perceived that was as like a battle trance kind of situation, where he steadies his mind and clears his mind of anxieties so that he is in a position of heightened focus. But I'm wondering if that is what Paddon Fane is referring to. I don't know how like relevant that would be, but then if his father knew that he was ill, if his father had this heron-marked sword, if his father knew of the prophecies of the dragon and how the dragon would be reborn on the slopes of, is it the Dragon Mount, then potentially he prepared Rand for this eventuality by training him in skills that are like seemingly innocuous but would like benefit him greatly in later life. So yeah, just a little theory for you. I don't even know how relevant it would be to the plot, like if it was true. I have just read chapter 22. I'm 334 pages into it, and I'm enjoying parts of it, but once again, Rand's perspective is definitely the least compelling to me, which is frustrating because it's very obvious that he is going to be the dominant perspective throughout, I'm assuming, the majority of the series, with him, you know, being the dragon. But there are definitely interesting things going on. I don't trust Celine as far as I can throw her. I feel like she definitely has this mysterious, like otherworldly, unnatural beauty that is drawing all of the men to her, but she is reminding me of the dark friend that I can't remember where they were. Was it Whitebridge, where they were injured? Matt and Rand were in a barn, and Matt was really, really ill because of the dagger, and this beautiful woman came in and it turned out that she was actually a dark friend. Like, Celine is giving that. I understand why they trust her in terms of like, she does have this otherworldly, unnatural compulsion, but she is so suspicious to me. And I was going to come in and talk to you a little bit about her regardless, because over the last, I think she's been present for the last like 70-ish pages, and I have been suspicious of her the entire time. But then I've just read chapter 22, which is from Moiraine's perspective, who is hiding out in a cottage where there are two old Aes Sedai and their warder that live there, and they kind of like retired from being active Aes Sedai and are just pursuing knowledge and history in this cottage. It's so cute, and I hope they are living their best lives, honestly, because they seem to be having a grand time. But in Moiraine's perspective, she did mention a character that I'm assuming has been mentioned at some other point throughout here that I am unable to remember right now, but she mentioned a character called Lanfear, who is the daughter of Night, and my money is on that being Celine right now, because Celine is suspicious. I can't see it being like another just like standard dark friend, with how I thought that's what it was going to be to start off with, but with how she's still present even though they've escaped this like other dimension situation, I feel like she's somebody a little bit more significant than that. So that's who I'm betting Celine is, but I don't remember any earlier references to Lanfear, so I can't say like who she is exactly and what the significance is, but it does say in this little section where I discovered her name that she's been linked to the dragon, which would make sense why she's following Rand around, and also why she is so intent on him embracing this influential role and like taking power for himself. So I think that's pretty much all I have to report on at this point so far. We have hit like a slower point in the book where we once again have a lot of traveling scenes. I'm excited for Rand to kind of regroup. I'm assuming he's going to regroup with Matt, Perrin, and is it Ingtar, who's the guy from Faldara, just because I'm excited for his perspective to move on to something else a little bit. But yeah, Moraine's last chapter that I just read was really, really interesting, and I'm also excited to get more from Nynaeve and Egwene, which I just did a very quick flick, just like not even looking, and Elaine jumped out at like the first word on a page. So I'm excited for more of Elaine as well. But Egwene and Nynaeve have now arrived at Tarvalon, which is one of the most interesting things about this to me, like one of the things straight off from like when it was mentioned I was most interested in exploring. So I'm definitely looking forward to hearing more about that. So I just finished chapter 31, which is the very end of it, is where Perrin is talking about the big statue that's being uncovered in the town that Rand, Hurin, and Loyal passed through not too long ago. And she says that it's a sangreal, which is what Aes Sedai channel the power through to amplify it. And this one in particular is one of the 2 biggest ever made, and it was made with male channelers in mind, so only male channelers can use it to amplify their powers. But there is one that is currently still buried that female Aes Sedai can use. When Perrin was talking about this, she was saying about how it's not dangerous because the female one's still covered. There's no male Aes Sedai anymore who are able to actually use it, so it's fine. And it only poses a threat anyway if they're used in unison, which I thought was very, very interesting, and I feel like it's definitely like foreshadowing of something to come, but I don't know at what point in the series it's going to be relevant, because I feel like it's quite clear that both Egwene and Nynaeve are very, very strong Aes Sedai, so they definitely, or at least one of them, will have the capability to channel the power needed to survive using this sangreal. So I feel like at some point the female one is going to be uncovered, and Rand and whoever it is, because it's Rand, I feel like it's going to be Egwene, are going to end up using these hopefully in the fight for like against the Dark One. But they're already hunting for the Horn, which is said to like herald the final battle between the dragon and the Dark One, so I'm not sure when that's going to fall. I feel like realistically it would be something that happened at the end of a series, but because the process of publishing or writing this series was so disjointed, and that it was intended to be a trilogy, then a standalone, then a trilogy, then it'll end up being a longer series, I'm not sure at what point that's going to come into play, but I feel like from what I just read, it's definitely a hint of things to come. So I'm kind of nearing the end now. I'm on page 510, so I only have like 150 pages left, and I am enjoying it, but I'm disappointed with the way that it's very much just following the formula of the first book, even down to the point where we've now at page like 490-ish decided that we have to accelerate the original plan and travel through the ways to get to the final conflict of the book. So it seems as though it's heading in the same direction, where we've had this slow exploration of the world with like some character development, and we've obviously been learning a lot about the world, the culture of different parts of the world, a little bit about the magic, the history, and that kind of stuff. But then it's got to a point where we need the book to have a point, so we're gonna just like head into the ways so that we can get to that point a little bit quicker, instead of like realistically traversing the landscape. Or how about actually the place where we need to go, how about it's just a little bit closer so that we don't have to use the ways. I think the ways was one of my least favorite parts of the first book, and then my actual least favorite part was that end conclusion because I don't like the way that Robert Jordan writes action scenes. So we will see how it goes, but like it just seems a little bit formulaic. So at this point I couldn't really tell you whether I enjoyed this one more or less than book one, because in terms of content I feel like what's happened in this one, it's really just exactly the same, but I feel like I liked this one a tiny bit more. Although one of my favorite parts of the two books so far is the section that was in Camelin in Eye of the World, but generally overall I would say I've enjoyed the contents of this one more. But I'm also disappointed that it is very much feeling like a repeat of book one in terms of the structure of it, which makes me enjoy it less because I'm almost reading the same thing again. So I'm 556 pages into this now, and I think I've just clicked. It's chapter 40 is about to start. I feel like Leandrin as Black Aja, and I feel like it's so obvious, and I don't know how I missed it, because when she came to Egwene and Nynaeve and was like, you gotta come with me, you gotta come save Rand, I was like, this is suspicious because she literally doesn't care about Rand at all. And I feel like she did a good job of being like, I don't care, but I mean, it seems important to you guys. But then she also kind of just doesn't care about anybody. And Black Aja have been mentioned repeatedly over like the last couple of chapters. Then I'm surprised it got to this point for me to think, wait a minute. So it's right at the end, I don't know what it was, but they're about to go through the Waygate near Tommen's Head, which, where is Tommen's Head on the map? I keep looking for it on this damn map and I cannot for the life of me see it. I think I'm gonna Google where it is, because this is the 4th time I've looked at this. I just know that it must be a decent way away from Tarvalon and also from, is it Kerr? Do we have a pronunciation of that in here before I make a fool of myself? Wow. Kyrian? That's not how I would have said it, so I'm glad that I looked that up. Kyrian. I know it has to be a decent way away from Tarvalon and Kyrian, which is leading me to believe that it's over like on the west of the map, but I can't find it. But anyway, they've popped out of the Waygate, or they're about to pop out of the Waygate at Tommen's Head, and Leandrin's like, I finally brought you to where you must go, and it's just clicked in my head like 100% Black Aja. Makes so much sense, and I can't believe it took me so long to get to this conclusion. I will say that I am happy that we didn't end up taking the ways to Tommen's Head, like from Rand's perspective, because like I said, it felt too much like a repeat of Eye of the World. But now I'm disappointed again because Egwene, Nynaeve, Min and Elaine ended up going that way. I have to say as well that I'm really interested in the girls' perspective and the Tarvalon perspective. I do hope they end up going back because I like that a lot. I'm upset actually how little of it we've had throughout this book, so I do hope that they end up returning there. But something that I really like about it is the relationship that's forming between especially like Egwene, Min and Elaine, and also which of Elaine's brothers is it that Egwene seems to be into? Is it Gallard? Intrigued about that as well, especially when we compare it to how in the live show for Eye of the World I said that my prediction was that if Rand ended up with anybody it was going to be Elaine. So I'm very close to the end now. The next time I check in with you guys will probably be my wrap up of this book, but I have 67 pages left and I'm surprised where we're at. It has definitely changed from what I thought it was going to be, and I'm glad that it has, because as I've discussed, like I thought it was going to go in the same direction of Eye of the World, and I really just wasn't about that. But I did not call Egwene, or like the whole thing that happened with Leandrin and Egwene, Nynaeve, Min and Elaine, did not see that happening. I feel like it is valid though that I didn't see it happening, because it does seem to have come out of nowhere. I mean, red flags should have been raised when we were first introduced to the Shan-Chan, and they have like Aes Sedai on chains, but I didn't expect it to come at the end of this book, which I do feel is valid, because why would I? We've barely seen any of the girls in this book, and then it just suddenly like switches to their perspective where they're being handed over to the Shan-Chan and they are like the dominant perspectives that we're following in this book so far. So I'm shocked. It's giving Realm of the Earthlings for me right now, just because there is like big elements of slavery throughout that series, and it is definitely uncomfortable to read. So Robert Jordan is doing his job in that aspect. I'm interested to see how it resolves. I'm hoping that Rand doesn't get involved, although I feel like he's got to, because he is the hero of our story. But I am loving Nynaeve girl bossing her way through the end of this book right now. And as I mentioned in an earlier update, like my favorite element of this book has been those very small glimpses we've got into the girls at Tarvalon, and also the sisterhood that they seem to be building, which I am interested to see if that kind of dissolves in later books based on their rivalry in competing for Rand, because they all seem very civil about it right now, and I feel like as things potentially escalate throughout the series, we're not going to remain civil as like real feelings get involved. My money's still on Elaine though. That's the one that I'm hoping for there, provided she doesn't die, because we got potential, like, well, nobody's safe right now where we're at. So I feel like I would have expected or appreciated this plotline more if the book ended on it, like if the book ended with Egwene's capture, and that's where we went into book 3, where I feel like we're going to get a resolution to this that I don't feel, not that it will be rushed, it will just seem kind of potentially pointless if it's resolved, considering that I'm on page 602 and it's only actually been introduced in like the last 40 or so pages of the book. But I will reserve judgment, of course, until we get to the end, but I'm definitely more invested in the end of this one than I was gearing up to be, based on my assumptions and where I felt like the story was going. My one big criticism of this book that's like bringing my enjoyment down, I think, or what I want more of, is the lack of Perrin and Matt in this one. Perrin particularly, because he was my favorite character, like him and Lan, throughout the first book, but also we're not getting a lot from Matt's perspective either, and I feel like there's big potential for the downfall of this series for me to be how dominant Rand's perspective is, and obviously I can't say for sure whether that's going to happen so far because we're very early into the series, but with the way that this is laid out and the way that we spent so much time with Rand, for it then to feel like such a pivot to bring it back to like Nynaeve and Egwene and them have like the bulk of the plot from this book, I feel like there should be, or I would prefer there to be, more balance between perspectives that we're presently not seeing. I am very, very nearly at the end. I'm about to finish this, but I'm on page 661, and I told you that she was Lanfear. I called it. Oh my god. I was, now that she's just finally randomly turned up in this scene, I was about to like question myself and be like, was I reading a little bit too much into the text there? She just introduced herself as Lanfear. I knew it. I'm not sure how I feel about this love pentagon that's going on though, I have to say, especially because there's no like, it's not a romance, you know, so it doesn't read like a romance. Like Min's just sat there like, I don't even like you, but I want to be with you. Not feeling it, but I'm really, really happy with the end of this book. I'm really, really enjoying it, and I think it's definitely been done, like the action scenes and stuff were done a lot better than in the Eye of the World. But I have like 8 pages left, so I'm gonna go finish those and bring you guys some more detailed thoughts a little bit later on. So I have now finished The Great Hunt by Robert Jordan, and I did enjoy this. I feel like I've gone into this series very unassuming, which is helping me with my enjoyment of it. I've heard some pretty bad things about this. People either really, really love it or really, really hate it. So when I've gone into it, I've kind of I've been open to anything, and I feel like that is why I am skewing towards the side of enjoying this, because I had very low expectations going in. So I did rate this one 4 stars, but that being said, there are like things about it that I don't enjoy. Well, it's definitely that I don't enjoy, but things that I understand why people would rate this lower, I guess. So in terms of a comparison against Eye of the World, I enjoyed this at least the same amount. I feel like I enjoyed the contents of this a little bit more, but in terms of like pushing the plot, this didn't really do what I expected the second book in a series to do, especially knowing that this series was intended to be shorter than it is, because I feel in terms of, if you look at the grand scheme of things, the only thing that happened in here is that we got some more political factions, we got some more cultures, we visited some more places, but then in terms of like plot and character progression, we just have some character progression from Rand in like the last 60-70 pages. My main kind of criticism, the thing that I like the least about this right now, is that the characters are reactionary and they're just waiting for things to happen to them and reacting to it instead of having agency. And and going out with intention and interacting with the plot themselves. And I do definitely see room for this to change in the future, because especially given that character progression that we have from Rand at the end, he is very much, they're all very much resisting their destiny right now, but I feel like as Rand is hopefully going to grow into this Dragon Reborn role, we are going to see more agency from him, and hopefully he will be more proactive about interacting with the plot. That's just a personal preference on my regard. I have read books like the Witchland series by Susan Dennard, which is also very reactionary, and it's just not a kind of story that I enjoy. Out of the core characters, I would say that Rand is still my least favorite, and I don't hate him or anything. I just feel like out of all of the perspectives that we have, he is the one that I'm definitely less interested in. He is a little bit preoccupied still with all of the women in the world. I mean, he's young, I get it, but that does add to my, I guess, slight dislike of him a little bit. But generally speaking, it's just that he is to me the least interesting person in this entire series. So it's frustrating that we're spending like 60 or 70% of our time with him, especially because we have characters like Moraine and Lan who are present in one, so they're here at the beginning and then they're present in one chapter in the middle, and then in the, is it technically an epilogue or is it the last chapter? In the last 10 pages they just appear again out of nowhere, and it's like, where have you been? What have you been doing? Why were you just not relevant through this entire book and then just popped up at the end? I feel like it would have been more natural for them to turn up at the beginning of the next book and have it be like a, oh yeah, we've been here, or like have the beginning be like them just arriving, just to make it seem a little bit more natural and not like, oh, last chapter, Moraine and Lan are back. And I feel like in terms of true like criticism of, I guess, the writing of this book, I don't feel like the perspectives are balanced at all, and that is this series' biggest weakness for me right now, because there is so much happening. We have so many characters, but we're focusing on Rand doing very little in comparison to even other characters doing very little. I feel like, I know online somewhere you can get a breakdown of like how much of each book is Rand and how much of each book is everybody else. I haven't looked at that, but I am hoping that we do get some more balance throughout the end, because it just also makes things seem like they come out of nowhere, like how the girls were present, and I think we had 2 chapters throughout the book. Like after everyone split off, we had 2 chapters that had like Egwene, Min, Elaine and Nynaeve in them, and then all of a sudden the end of the book was about them, and it seemed like it came out of nowhere because the balance of perspective was not there earlier in the story. Like we're mainly following Rand. Like we have very little Matt or Perrin in here. Moraine is like non-existent, and I just truly think that I would enjoy this series a lot more if we had more balance. Obviously I am assuming that the majority of the series is going to be following Rand, but I am hoping that we get more balance. I have heard during the live show, I think Sandra mentioned that there are characters that become a lot more prominent as the series go on, including characters that like we've heard very little from at this point. In terms of that, I would say that characters that we know very little of that I would like to know more about is Elaine's brothers right now, and I'm a big Elaine fan. I don't know why, because she has done, I would say, very little. She's around, but she's played like a pretty minimal part of the plot, but she's a character that I'm very, very much interested in. The female characters were my favorites in here, and I'm really glad about that, because I feel like we're starting to see them actually shine, because my opinion of them in the first book was pretty much just like, they're fine, they haven't really done anything, so I don't really care about them right now. But because of the lack of Perrin, who was my favorite perspective from book 1, they have been my favorite perspective of this book. So essentially what I want from book 3 is a little bit more agency from Rand, which I hope we're going to get. My prediction is that he's going to ascend into like a king-like role. I don't feel like it would make sense for that to happen in the next book, but I know that this was intended, like I said, to be a shorter series, so I feel like that might happen like a little bit sooner than I'm comfortable with. But over part of this series, like he's definitely going to ascend into more of a king-like role, and I'm excited to see kind of like character growth from him in that regard. And aside from that, I would just like a little bit more of a balanced split between the rest of the perspectives, just to spice it up a little bit, make it a little bit more interesting, make it less of following Rand as he's just traveling around, and show me what other people are doing, because we have all of these really interesting like groups coming in, like the Sean Chan, and they very much like, it felt very Stormlight how they just turned up in one chapter in the middle of the book, and then they weren't really mentioned too much until we got to the end again, because they were super interesting to me, because they were the remnants of Arthur Hawkwind's armies, who was like this very well, I feel like he's a well-regarded king. Is that just because he conquered or like brought the countries together and tried to like conquer the world by sending his armies into other places? Or was he actually a good guy? He's one of the people that was risen by the Great Horn. He's one of the legendary characters. Potentially, like, we're gonna find out some more from him, which I feel would be interesting. But I am very interested in the Seanchan because I expected them to be a nicer people than they are. But then I feel like it's just they're always going to seem oppressive when they're coming into the land that we're in. What's this world called? Do I even know? But when they're turning up and forcing people to live in a way that goes against how they're currently living, that's always going to seem oppressive. When in reality, aside from how they treat the Aes Sedai, which is terrible, everybody else, they're kind of like, you can live by our rules, like it's fine, just don't, as long as you don't break the rules, you're fine. So they are very interesting and I would like to hear more from them because it feels like they were shoehorned in as the conflict of this book for very little reason, and once again it didn't seem like a natural progression. It seemed kind of abrupt. So yeah, 4 stars. Really excited for book 3. I will say that while this is still a 4-star read, if we don't have the level of progression that I would like from book 3, if it feels like we're just meandering around for the last 100 pages to actually do something, I feel like my rating is going to drop to 3 stars because I need, like, when we're getting so far into a series where the books are this thick, I just feel like I'm needing a little bit more. That was my vlog for The Great Hunt. I do hope you've enjoyed it. Once again, no spoilers in the comments, please. Everyone was pretty good about Eye of the World, which was great. So thank you for that, because that's what makes me nervous about posting videos like this. And I will be back, I think, what month are we in now? April. I think I'll be back in June with the, is it the dragon? I don't have my glasses on. I think book 3 is the Dragon Reborn, but my next spoiler video for the series will be coming in June. I do hope you've enjoyed this video. Let me know your thoughts down in the comments. And aside from that, guys, please don't forget to like this vlog if you liked it and subscribe if you wanna, and I'll see you in a couple of months. Bye!
Oh, you bite your friend like chocolate. You say you'll go where nobody knows, with guns hidden under our petticoats. We're never gonna quit it, no, we're never gonna quit it, no.